Welcome to Relative, our family mess. Here, I bring you the raw, unspoken stories of older men betrayed by the very families they spent a lifetime protecting, and the dark secrets hidden within the modern home. Now, here is today's story. 38 years of driving freight trains taught me that every disaster announces itself before it arrives. A flicker in a signal lamp. A hum in the rail that shouldn't be there. A pressure gauge drifting half a needle past where it belonged. The men who got hurt were never the ones who hit trouble suddenly. They were the ones who missed the warning that came first. I missed every warning that mattered, and they all came from inside my own family. My name is Hugo Spears. I'm 66 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I could read any system put in front of me. Because a locomotive is just 10,000 parts agreeing to move in the same direction. And if you listen close enough, the parts tell you the truth. I trusted that instinct in the cab for nearly 4 decades, and it never once failed me. It failed me in my own kitchen on an ordinary Tuesday night. The night my son-in-law handed me a warm cup and smiled like he meant it. "You look worn out, Hugo," Talon said. He set the mug down on the table in front of me, steam curling up between us. He was still in his work clothes, the crisp shirt of a man who spent his days in a law office, sleeves rolled to the forearm like he'd been doing something honest. "Chamomile and a little honey. Isabella used to make it for you, didn't she? Before." He said the word easily, the way you'd mention a season that had passed. Before meant before Paula died. My wife had been gone 3 weeks, taken by an infection the doctors first called minor and then, far too late, called something else. The house I'd shared with her for 31 years had become too quiet to sleep in. So I'd come to stay a while with my daughter and her husband. It seemed the sensible thing. A man alone at my age, they said. Family looking after family. I wrapped my hands around the mug. The warmth felt good against my fingers, which had ached more since Paula passed, the way old joints do when grief settles into them. "That's kind of you, son," I said. I called him son because I'd been raised to, because my daughter loved him, because I'd spent years choosing not to see the cold thing that lived behind his eyes. I appreciate it. He watched me drink. I noticed that, even then. Not the polite half-glance a man gives when he's offered you something. He watched the way I once watched a boiler gauge on a bad grade, waiting for a number to move. I drank it down because it was warm and because I was tired, and a tired man stops asking why kindness has arrived so suddenly from a place it never came from before. When the cup was empty, he took it from my hands, rinsed it, and dried it himself. I should have heard the signal in that. Talon Frost had never once washed a dish under that roof. "Get some rest," he said. "Isabella's already turned in. Caden's out with friends." He paused at the kitchen doorway, and I felt his gaze touch the corner of the room where my old roll-top desk sat, where I kept my papers, my pension records, the careful handwriting I'd practiced since I was a boy. "We'll talk tomorrow, about the house in Flagstaff, about making things easier on you." The tingling started in my feet about 20 minutes later. At first I thought it was the cold floor, or the way I'd been sitting. I flexed my toes inside my socks, and the sensation only spread, climbing my ankles like water rising in a flooded pit. I have felt fear in my life. I have felt the lurch of 40 loaded cars losing grip on a wet downgrade. This was worse, because there was no brake to reach for. The numbness moved up my calves, into my thighs, and when I tried to stand, my legs simply did not answer. I went down. I did not fall the way a man falls when he trips. I slid, slow and helpless, off the kitchen chair, and onto the floor of the house my daughter lived in. And I lay there with my cheek against the cool tile, fully awake inside a body that had quit on me. My mind raced through the checklist a lifetime had drilled into me. Assess, identify, do not panic, because panic kills faster than the failure does. I tried to call out, "Isabella!" It came out as a breath, a shape with no sound behind it. My tongue lay thick and useless. I tried again, and nothing came. My eyes still worked. I could see the leg of the table, the baseboard, the thin line of light under the hallway door. I could hear the refrigerator hum and the tick of the wall clock Paula had given me one Christmas, the one shaped like a brass railway lantern. Somewhere in the back of my failing thoughts, her voice surfaced, the way it had in her last weeks when the fever made her urgent and strange. "Hugo," she had whispered, gripping my wrist with a strength her body shouldn't have had. "Check the little black engine. Promise me." I'd thought it was the sickness talking. I patted her hand and promised, the way you promise a frightened child anything to ease them. Now I lay on my daughter's kitchen floor, unable to move a single finger. And for the first time, I wondered if my wife had been trying to save my life from the grave. The house went dark around me, and in that dark, I waited. I do not know how long I lay there before the footsteps came. Time loses its shape when your body becomes a cage. I measured it the only way I had left, by the tick of Paula's brass lantern clock and the slow drag of my own breathing. Each pull of air, a deliberate act I had to will into happening. The house had gone fully dark. Then, near the top of the stairs, a line of pale light appeared beneath a door, and I heard the soft give of floorboards under a careful step. Talon was awake. He came down slowly, not the heavy, unthinking tread of a man crossing his own home at night, but the measured placement of someone who did not want to be heard. I knew that kind of walking. On a rail yard at night, you learn the difference between a man who belongs there and a man who is hoping no one notices him. Talon walked like the second kind. He stopped a few feet from where I lay. I could see his slippers, the hem of a robe, the faint shine of a phone screen lighting the underside of his jaw. He crouched, and for one cold moment his face came level with mine. He studied me the way a man studies a job nearly finished. Then he passed a hand in front of my open eyes, slow, testing. I did not blink. I could not. I let him believe I was gone somewhere deep, and it was the hardest thing I have ever done, lying still while every nerve in me screamed to flinch away from him. "Out cold," he murmured, almost to himself. Satisfied, he straightened and lifted the phone to his ear, and he did not bother to lower his voice much, because he believed the only other ears in the room belonged to a body that could no longer carry sound to a brain. He was wrong. I heard all of it. "It's done," he said. "He's down. No, he won't remember the timeline. That's the whole point of the compound. By morning, he'll think he had some kind of episode." A pause. The other voice came thin and tinny through the speaker, a man's voice, smooth and unhurried, the voice of someone used to being paid for his opinion. I would not learn the name Ariel Hubbard for days yet, but I heard that voice for the first time on the floor of my daughter's kitchen, and I never forgot it. "You'll sign the evaluation Thursday," Talon went on. "Diminished capacity, progressive decline, the works. We file before the weekend." He listened. Then he laughed, low and easy. And that laugh did more damage to me than the poison ever could. "Relax. Once the guardianship goes through, it's all academic. The house in Flagstaff, the pension, the collection, all of it roots through me. He won't last the week at the facility we picked anyway. Old men go downhill fast once they're institutionalized. Nobody questions it. Then the land is ours. The land is ours. I lay there and let those 3 words settle into me like cold water into a hull breach. He was not talking about helping a grieving father. He was not talking about a confused old man who needed looking after. He was talking about an end date. He had measured my remaining life the way I once measured fuel for a run, and he had decided there was just enough left in the tank to be useful, and no more. My own son-in-law. The man my daughter had married. The man I had called son across a dinner table for years. Rage came up in me with nowhere to go. I could not clench a fist. I could not turn my head. I could not so much as harden my jaw. Every signal my brain fired died somewhere on the line between the thought and the muscle. The way a message dies when the wire is cut clean through. I had spent my working life keeping things from failing, and now the only thing I owned outright, my own grief and my own anger, had no track to run on. "I have to go," Talon said into the phone. "Isabella might wake up." A pause, and then, lighter, the words a man uses when he is closing a deal he is pleased with. "No, she doesn't know anything. She thinks he's sick. Let's keep it that way." She thinks he's sick. That single sentence reached past my fury and laid hold of something deeper. My daughter did not know. Whatever this was, whatever he had built around me in the dark, he had built it around her too. She was inside the trap and didn't see the walls. Talon ended the call. He stood over me a moment longer. Then he reached down, and with a tenderness that made my skin crawl, he eased a throw cushion under my head, the way you might arrange a thing you wanted found in good condition. He even smoothed my collar. "Rest easy, Hugo," he said softly. "It'll all be taken care of." He went back up the stairs. The line of light beneath his door winked out. The house returned to its hum and tick, the ordinary night sounds of a place where, as far as anyone sleeping in it knew, nothing at all was wrong. But everything was wrong, and now I knew it. This was no episode. No stroke had reached out of the dark to claim me. There had been a warning before this disaster, the way there is always a warning, and the warning had been wearing my daughter's husband's face and carrying a cup of warm tea. I had drunk it down and thanked him. I made myself breathe. In. Out. The one system still answering my commands. A railroader does not abandon a stalled train. He finds out why it stopped, and he gets it moving again, no matter how long the night. Somewhere above me, my son-in-law slept the sleep of a man who believed he had already won. And down here in the dark, flat on my back and unable to lift a hand, I began, very slowly, to plan how I would prove him wrong. The first sign of life came in my left hand, sometime before dawn. A single finger, the index. It twitched, weak and uncertain, like a relay closing after a long power loss. I sent the command again, throwing every scrap of will down that severed wire. Move. And the finger moved. A railroader knows you do not restart a dead engine all at once. You bring systems up in order, one at a time, and you do not rush the sequence or you flood the works. So I worked the finger until it bent on command, then the next, then the whole hand. The tingling that had drowned me hours before ran in reverse now, retreating down my arm like the tide pulling back from a flooded yard. By the time the window over the sink turned from black to gray, I could move both arms. My legs came slower, heavy and clumsy, but they came. I rolled onto my side, and the simple act of choosing which way my body would lie felt like a victory worth more than any I had known. I did not call out. That was the discipline talking. Talon believed I was somewhere deep and far,
Isabella believed I was sick. The smartest thing a man in a trap can do is let the people who set it keep believing it is still shut.
I got my hands under me and pushed. The first attempt failed and put me back down hard. The second got me to my knees. I knelt on the kitchen tile, breathing like I had run the length of a freight yard. And I looked toward the corner where my old roll-top desk sat in the grey light. Talon had looked at that desk last night. I had seen him do it, the way his gaze touched it on his way out of the room. A man does not glance at furniture the way you glance at a problem, unless it holds something he wants. It took me a long while to cross the kitchen. I went hand over hand along the counter, then the wall, my legs deciding with each step whether they would hold me. When I reached the desk, I sank into the chair, rolled the top back, and there, square in the center of the blotter, where I would never have left them, were papers that claimed to be mine. A power of attorney. My name at the top, Hugo Spears. And at the bottom, on the signature line, was my signature. Except it was not. I have written my name the same way for 60 years. My father taught me penmanship at a kitchen table when I was a boy, made me practice until the letters flowed clean, because he said a man's signature was a promise, and a promise should never look uncertain. There is a thing I do that I never taught to anyone. When I finish my last name, I draw the underline back beneath the whole signature in a single unbroken stroke that ends with a small upward hook. Paula used to tease me about it. Your little caboose, she called it. The car at the end that tells you the train is complete. The signature on that page had the underline. Someone had studied my hand closely enough to know it was there, but they had drawn it left to right. My caboose runs the other way. It always has. A small thing. A thing no one would catch who had not drawn that line 10,000 times and felt the muscle of it. Whoever had signed my name had practiced, had taken their time, had built this the way you build a thing you mean to use in a court of law. I sat back in the chair and let the cold truth move through me. This was not a single bad night. A man does not forge a power of attorney in a panic. This had been prepared, studied, rehearsed. The tea was only the last step in something that had been rolling toward me for a long while, gathering speed the way a heavy train gathers speed on a grade, silent until it is right on top of you. I went through the rest with shaking hands. A draft petition for emergency guardianship, a blank intake form from a private care facility I had never heard of, and tucked between them, half hidden against the spine of a folder, a single business card. I almost missed it. I drew it out and held it to the gray window light. Finley Martinez, private investigations, a phone number, an address 2 towns over. On the back, in handwriting that was neither mine nor forged to look like mine, 4 words were scrawled in dark ink. Document the old man. I read it twice. Document the old man. Not help, not protect, not care for. Document. Like I was a defect to be photographed for a claim. A floorboard creaked overhead. I went still. The card pressed between my fingers. Footsteps crossed the upstairs hall, light and quick, not Talon's careful tread, a young man's stride. Then they stopped at the top of the stairs, and I heard breathing. And I knew without seeing that someone stood up there in the dark, looking down toward the kitchen. My grandson, Caden. For a long moment, neither of us moved. I felt him there the way you feel a presence on a quiet platform before a train you cannot yet hear. Then, softly, the footsteps retreated. A door eased shut. I slid the business card into the pocket of yesterday's shirt, beside the folded power of attorney with its backward caboose. The poison had nearly taken my body, but it had left my mind exactly where Talon least wanted it. Sharp, awake, and reading the signals at last.
I needed to be gone before the house woke.
A man thinks more clearly once he has a destination, and mine had arrived the moment I read that card. Whatever Finley Martinez had been hired to document, he had documented me, which meant somewhere out there was a record of who I really was, drawn by a stranger paid to look. But that was a thread to pull later. First, I had to get my body out the door, and my body was still only half mine. I pushed up from the desk chair and tested my legs against the floor. They held, shaking, like a colt's first hour. I crossed to the back door off the kitchen and turned the handle. It did not turn. I tried again, slower, thinking the bolt had caught. It had not. The deadbolt was thrown, and the little thumb turn that should have freed it from the inside had been removed. In its place was a smooth metal plate, the kind you install when you want a door that opens only with a key from one side. I stood there in the gray light, and a cold understanding moved through me. This was not a door meant to keep intruders out. This was a door meant to keep a man in. I went to the front of the house, quiet as I could manage, and found the same thing. The front deadbolt, keyed both ways now, locked tight. Talon had not simply poisoned me and gone to bed. He had sealed the house around me like a boxcar with its doors chained, so that even if I woke early, I would wake into a cage and stay there until he chose to open it. For a moment, the old panic reached for me. A flooded engine room, a jammed hatch, no way out and the water rising. I had felt that before, decades ago, and I had learned then what I made myself remember now. Panic does not open a door. Observation opens a door. You stop fighting the failure and you start reading the machine until it tells you where it is weak. Every machine is weak somewhere. So is every house. The windows in the main rooms were the new kind, locked or painted shut, impossible to force quietly. But the house was old in its bones, and old houses keep their secrets in their oldest rooms. The laundry room at the back still had the original window, a single sash above the utility sink. The paint cracked and the frame worn soft with age. I worked my fingers under it and lifted. It resisted, then gave, sliding up with a groan that sounded like a shout in the silence. I froze and listened. The house held its breath with me. No footsteps. No light. The opening was narrow, and the drop on the other side was only a few feet onto the grass. But I was 66 years old, with legs that had been dead until an hour before, and I will not pretend it was graceful. I went out head first and caught myself hard on my forearms in the wet grass. I lay there a moment in the cold morning air, breathing in dirt and dew, and something I had been certain hours earlier I might never taste again. The plain open air of a world that was not a trap. I got to my feet against the side of the house and started toward the driveway. My truck sat where I had left it. The old pickup Paula used to call the last locomotive because she said I drove it like I was still hauling 40 cars and could not quite stop. The keys. I needed the keys, and they hung on a hook by the kitchen door, behind a door I could not open. I stopped, defeated for one long breath. And then I heard the soft scrape of a window above me. I looked up. On the second floor, a window had eased open, and there in the gap stood Caden, my grandson. 19 years old, my daughter's boy, a young man I had taught to set the couplers on a model railroad when his hands were small. He looked down at me, his face pale, his eyes wide, and I saw in them something I had not let myself hope for. He was not afraid of me. He was afraid for me. Neither of us spoke. We did not dare. But he held up one finger, the way you tell a man to wait, then disappeared. A moment later, something small dropped through the gap, and landed in the grass at my feet with a soft jingle.
My truck keys. I picked them up and looked back up at the window. And Caden was there again. He pressed his open hand flat against the glass and held it there, the way a boy holds his hand to a train window when the platform starts to pull away and he is not ready to say goodbye. I raised my hand to him, steady as I could make it. Then he mouthed 2 words through the glass, slow and clear. "Go, hurry." He knew. However much he knew, he understood enough to drop a set of keys to a man the rest of the household believed was dying. And he understood enough to be terrified of what would happen if his stepfather found out. I did not waste the gift. I crossed to the truck, eased the door open so the hinge would not cry, and climbed in. The engine caught on the first turn, loud as a horn in a tunnel, and I did not wait to see what lights came on. I backed out, swung the wheel, and pointed the old pickup toward the open road. In the mirror, the house shrank behind me. And inside it, a 19-year-old boy stood at a window, having just chosen, quietly and at real cost, which side of this he was on. I did not yet know how much that choice would matter. I only knew which direction I was driving. Home. The drive gave me 3 hours alone with the road and the ghosts. And the ghosts did most of the talking. Interstate 17 runs north out of the valley and climbs toward the high country, and I had driven it 100 times with Paula in the seat beside me. She used to ride with one hand out the window, riding the wind like a child, telling me about her music students, the ones who could not find the beat, and the ones who heard things in a song that she herself had missed. She filled that truck cab with her voice, the way sunlight fills a canyon at noon, all the way to the corners. Now the seat beside me held nothing but her old travel cushion and the silence she had left behind. My hands shook on the wheel, and I could not tell any more how much was the poison still working its way out of me and how much was something harder to name. Every few miles I caught myself glancing at the empty seat, the way you glance at a gauge out of habit long after the engine is cold. I kept hearing her in those last fevered days, her fingers digging into my wrist. "Check the little black engine. Promise me, Hugo." I thought the infection had taken her clarity before it took the rest of her. The doctors had called it sepsis, a thing that started small, a wound that should have healed, and it turned in a matter of days into something that swept through her like fire through dry grass. By the time anyone took it seriously, there was no train fast enough to outrun it. I had sat by her bed and held that frantic hand and told her she was safe, that there was no little black engine she needed to worry about, that she should rest.
I'm not a man given to regret. In my work, regret gets people killed, because the mind that is busy mourning the last mistake is not watching the track ahead. But somewhere around the climb past the rim, with the pines closing in dark and tall on both sides, I let myself feel it. My wife had spent the last strength of her life trying to warn me, and I had soothed her like you soothe a child afraid of the dark. She had not been afraid of the dark. She'd been afraid of a man. It was past noon when I came down into the old town, the place where Paula and I had built our life before the world decided men my age belonged somewhere quieter. I did not go to my own house. That place had been sold a month ago. In the haze after the funeral, when Talon had stood at my shoulder saying it was the practical thing, the sensible thing, and I'd been too hollowed out to argue. Instead, I drove to the only door I was sure would open for me. Abner Banks lived 2 streets over from where I used to, in a low brick house with a yard full of the disassembled things old railroad men collect. We had worked the same line for 22 years, Abner and I, him on the maintenance crews and me in the cab. And there's a kind of trust that gets welded between 2 men who have kept each other alive around heavy moving steel. It does not rust. He opened the door before I reached it. He took one look at me, at the clothes I had slept and bled in, at whatever my face was doing, and his own face changed. "Hugo," he said. "Lord, get in here."
He did not ask questions on the porch. That is the kind of man he is. He sat me down at his kitchen table, the same scarred table where Paula and I had played cards with him and his late wife for years, and he poured coffee, black and strong, and set it in front of me and pulled out the chair across. "Talk when you're ready," he said. I got nowhere to be, so I talked. The tea, the numbness climbing my legs, the kitchen floor, the voice in the dark and the words, "The land is ours," the locked doors keyed against me from the inside, the forged signature with its backward caboose, the business card that said, "Document the old man," my grandson at the window, dropping the keys. Abner listened the way good men listen, without flinching, and without that look people give you when they have already decided you have lost your grip. When I finished, he sat quiet a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his thick hands. "I believe you," he said. 3 words. He said them plain, the way you state a load weight or a track number, a fact and not a comfort. And I will tell you that after a night spent learning my own family had measured my life in days, those 3 words nearly took the legs out from under me. "You don't think I'm confused?" I said. "An old man whose mind is going. I've known your mind for 22 years. Hugo, it don't go." He set the cup down. "And there's another reason I believe you." He looked at me, and something in his expression shifted, went careful, the way a man's face goes when he is about to set down a weight he has been carrying too long. "Because Paula came to see me near the end. Before the hospital." The kitchen went very still around us. The refrigerator hummed. A clock ticked somewhere in the next room. "She came here," I said. "She never told me. She made me swear not to tell you." Abner's jaw worked. "Said you'd defend him. Said you always saw the best in that man because Isabella loved him, and she couldn't get you to look straight at what was right in front of you." He drew a slow breath. "She sat right where you're sitting, Hugo. And she told me she was scared of him. Scared of him." I turned the words over the way you turn a part you have pulled from a failed machine, looking for the crack that explains everything. "Scared how?" I said. "Paula wasn't a woman who scared easy. She faced down a room of 40 children every day for 30 years. I know it." Abner refilled my cup, though I had barely touched it, just to give his hands something to do. "That's what stuck with me. She wasn't the nervous kind. But she sat at this table and she kept her voice low, like she thought somebody might be listening even here." He shook his head slowly. "She told me Talon had been after the 2 of you about money. Said he'd come to her 3, 4 times over the past couple years, asking you both to lend against the pension. Said he had opportunities. Said it was just temporary." "She never told me that either," I said, and the words came out hollow. "No, she handled it. Told him no every time, and didn't bring it to you, because she said the minute you knew Isabella's husband was in trouble, you'd empty your own pockets to fix it." Abner's eyes met mine. "She wasn't wrong, was she?" She wasn't. We both knew it. I had spent my whole life believing that a family closes ranks around its weakest member, that you do not let blood go under no matter the cost. Paula had loved that about me and feared it in equal measure, because she could see what I could not, that a man's best quality is exactly the lever a bad man uses to move him. "There's more," Abner said. "And I've gone back and forth on whether to tell you, because I don't have proof of it, only what she said and what I saw with my own 2 eyes. He laced his fingers together on the table. "When she got sick, that last time, it came on fast. You remember?" "I remember." I would remember it until the day I died. A scratch on her arm that would not heal. A fever they sent us home with twice, calling it nothing. A virus, rest and fluids. By the time the third doctor looked alarmed, the infection was in her blood, and after that it was a matter of days.
She was staying out at your place, Abner said carefully. Talon and Isabella had come up to help, on account of you were both worn down. And Paula called me one night, late, and her voice was wrong, foggy. She said she felt worse after her medicine, not better. Said she'd ask Talon to take her in, but every time she did, he told her she was overreacting. Told her the doctor said rest. Kept her home another day, and another. Abner stopped. His throat moved. I'm not saying that man killed your wife, Hugo. I don't know that. A body can go down from sepsis no matter what anybody does. But I've asked myself 100 times what would have happened if she'd gone in 2 days sooner. And I think she asked herself the same thing at the end. I think that's why she was so set on warning you. I sat with that for a long time. Outside, a freight horn sounded far off, a long, low note rolling down out of the high country, and the sound of it went through me like a hand laid flat against my chest. I did not let myself believe the worst of it. A man can drive himself off the rails chasing a thing he cannot prove. But I no longer doubted the shape of who Talon Frost was. A man who would forge my name and seal my doors and measure my remaining life in days was not a man who would have hurried to save the one person standing between him and what he wanted. At the very least, he had let her wait. At the very least. She left something, I said. It was not a question. It had been forming in me since the kitchen floor, since her voice surfaced out of the dark. She kept telling me to check the little black engine. I thought it was the fever. Abner frowned. The what? My collection. The model railroad I had built over 40 years, engine by engine, the way some men build a life in photographs. Paula had given me half of those locomotives herself, one each anniversary, each Christmas, until the shelves of my workshop held a whole brass and steel history of the two of us. There's a black engine, an old Baldwin switcher, oil can black, no markings. She bought it for me the year we married. It was always her favorite. My pulse picked up, the way it does when a train you have been waiting on finally shows its light at the far end of the yard. She told me to check it, over and over, and I never did, because I thought she didn't know what she was saying. Where's the collection now? Abner asked. Still at the house. The house I had sold. The new owners don't take possession till the end of the month. I packed most of it, but the heavy display case, the workshop pieces, I left them. Talon said he'd see to having them moved. I stood up too fast and the room tilted, and Abner came halfway out of his chair to steady me. I waved him off. I have to get out there before he does. If Paula left something inside that engine, and he gets to it first. I did not have to finish the sentence. Abner was already reaching for his keys. Then we're not wasting daylight, he said. I'll drive. You look like a man who shouldn't be behind a wheel. And I've been wanting a reason to see the old place one more time before strangers fill it up. We went out into the bright, cold afternoon. Two old railroaders chasing a dead woman's last instruction. And for the first time since I woke on that kitchen floor, I felt something other than fear moving in me. I felt the pull of a destination. The track ahead had a shape now, and somewhere along it, my wife was still waiting to tell me what she had known. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the way places do once they stop being yours. Abner pulled his truck into the drive and we sat a moment, both of us looking at it. 31 years of my life behind those windows. The porch where Paula graded papers in the evenings, the maple by the walk that we had planted as a switch of a sapling and that now threw shade across half the yard. The new owners had not moved in yet, but a realtor's lockbox hung on the front door like a tag on the toe of something already gone. I still had a key. The realtor had asked for it back,
and I had kept putting it off. And now I understood that some part of me had known I was not finished with this place.
We let ourselves in. The rooms stood empty and echoing, our footsteps loud on bare floors, the air holding that particular stillness of a house waiting for new life to fill it. I did not let myself stop in the doorways where memory crowded thickest. I went straight through to the back, to the converted garage I had spent 40 years turning into a workshop, and I prayed under my breath the whole way that Talon had not yet sent anyone for the heavy pieces.
He had not. The big display case stood against the far wall exactly as I had left it, glass-fronted, 4 shelves deep, and behind that glass sat the entire run of my life with Paula. Engines and cars and cabooses, brass and painted steel, each one tied to a year, a place, a reason. I had not seen them since the day of the funeral, and the sight of them now stopped me in the doorway with a force I had not braced for.
"Take your time," Abner said quietly behind me. But there was no time, and we both knew it. I crossed to the case and opened the glass. My hand went, without my telling it to the 3rd shelf, to the small black switcher sitting where it had always sat. Oil can black, no markings. The Baldwin she had bought me the year we married. The plainest engine in the whole collection, and her favorite all the same. She used to say it looked like it worked for a living. Like me. I lifted it down. It was heavier than it should have been. I knew my own collection the way I knew my own hands. Every weight, every balance. This engine had always been a hollow shell over a die-cast frame, light as a sparrow. The thing in my palm sat heavy and dead. The weight shifted low and toward the rear, like a boiler with water standing in it. "Somebody's been in here," I said. My voice did not sound like my own. Or she has. I turned it over. On the underside, where the body shell clipped to the frame, the seam had been opened and reset. The little tabs that held it, tabs I had snapped into place myself decades ago, had been worked loose and pressed back. And along one edge was a thin line of clear adhesive. Neat, deliberate. The work of careful hands that did not want the seam to gape. Paula's hands. She had a music teacher's patience for small, precise things. She could thread a needle in the dark, she liked to say. And she had clearly threaded this. I set the engine on the workbench. The same bench where I had taught a small boy named Caden to set couplers. And I worked my thumbnail under the seam. It resisted, then gave. The body shell lifted away. Inside, packed tight where the hollow should have been, was a tube of folded paper sealed in a sandwich of clear plastic against the dust and the years. For a moment, I could not make my hands take it. Abner had come up beside me, and neither of us spoke. The only sound was the empty house breathing around us and, far off through the workshop window, the long, low call of a freight horn rolling down out of the high country. The same note I had heard in Abner's kitchen, as if the line itself were keeping time with this. I drew the packet out. Through the plastic I could see Paula's handwriting, the careful, upright hand she had used to write 1,000 report cards and 1,000 notes left on the kitchen counter telling me what was for supper and that she loved me. I peeled the plastic back. There were several pages, folded smaller behind them. What looked like photographs and a few documents on official paper. But on top, addressed in a single line across the front, was a letter. For Hugo. If you are reading this, I was right. And I am so sorry. The words swam. I had to set the page down on the bench and brace both hands flat against the wood and just breathe for a moment. The way I had taught myself to breathe on that kitchen floor a lifetime ago. The night before. My wife had known. Dying, foggy with fever, certain no one would believe her. She had taken the one object in the world I would keep no matter what, the one thing I would carry from a burning house,
and she had hidden the truth inside it. And then she had spent her last strength trying to point me toward it with the only words the fever left her.
"Check the little black engine." "Hugo," Abner said gently, "you don't have to read it standing up." But I shook my head. I picked the letter back up. Out the window, the horn had faded, and the high country had gone quiet, and the late sun came slanting gold across the bench where 40 years of our life sat in brass and steel. "Yes, I do," I said. She waited long enough for me to listen. I'm not making her wait another minute. And I began to read what my wife had left me from the far side of the grave. "My dear Hugo," the letter began, "if you are reading this, I was right. And I am so sorry. Sorry that I could not make you see it while I was alive. Sorry that you had to find it this way, alone, after I was gone. I tried, my love. You have no idea how I tried. But you have only one blind spot in that careful mind of yours, and it has the shape of our family. And a man cannot see the thing he refuses to look at." I read it slowly, in her voice, the upright schoolteacher hand turning into the sound of her sitting across a kitchen table from me. Abner stood a few feet off, looking out the window, giving me what privacy a man can give in an empty room. "You think Talon is ambitious," she wrote. "You think he pushes too hard, that he loves money more than is wise, but that underneath he is good to our girl, and that is enough. Hugo, he is not ambitious. He is in trouble, and he has been for years, and the trouble is the kind a man does not climb out of by honest work." She laid it out the way she had laid out everything in our life together, plainly and without drama. Talon had come to her, not once, but again and again, asking them to borrow against the pension. She had refused him every time and kept it from me, because she knew what I would do. He had grown colder each time, she wrote, less the charming son-in-law, and more a man who looked at the two of us and saw an obstacle between himself and what he needed. Then came the line that stopped my breath. "Do not sign anything he puts in front of you. Not a single page, no matter how reasonable it sounds, no matter who is in the room. He will dress it up as helping you, as protecting you, as easing your burden now that I am gone. It is none of those things. He means to take control of you, the way you take control of a thing you intend to use up." She had seen it. Months out. Fever not yet in her blood. She had seen the whole shape of what landed on me on a kitchen floor 3 weeks after her funeral. I thought of the doors keyed against me, the forged signature with its backward caboose, and I understood that my wife had written me a warning so exact it might as well have been a weather report for a storm that had not yet formed. "There is one more thing, and it is the most important. So read it twice." I read it twice. "He has hired a man, a private investigator. I do not know the whole of it, but I overheard enough. Talon is paying someone to follow you and build a record that you cannot care for yourself, so that when the time comes, he can take you to a judge and have you declared incompetent. The investigator's name is Finley. I never got the last name. But Hugo, listen to me. From what I heard, this man has not given Talon what he wanted. Talon was angry on the phone, furious, because the investigator kept telling him there was nothing wrong with you. So if you can find this Finley, ask him what he really found. The truth about your own mind may be sitting in a stranger's file, and that stranger may be the one person in all of this with no reason left to lie." I lowered the letter and stood very still. Finley. Finley Martinez. The card was in my shirt pocket at that moment, against my chest, where it had been since I lifted it from that desk before dawn. "Document the old man," the back of it read. I had taken it for an order to manufacture evidence against me, but Paula's letter turned it on its head. A man hired to document me had documented the truth, and the truth was that there was nothing to find, and his employer had hated him for it. The investigator was not Talon's weapon.
He was the flaw in Talon's machine, the one part that had refused to fail on command. "She found him," I said aloud. Abner turned from the window. "The private detective. Talon hired a man to prove I was losing my mind, and the man wouldn't do it. Paula heard the whole thing. She's telling me to go find him." Abner came over and looked down at the pages without reaching for them. "She did all this from a sickbed," he said quietly. "Built you a case while she was dying." "She built me a case." I agreed, and my voice was not steady. Behind the letter were the photographs and the documents she had spoken of, and I knew I would have to go through every one of them carefully, that there would be more in this packet than a single afternoon could hold. But the letter had already done the one thing I needed most. It had pointed me down the line. I thought of Caden's hand flat against the window glass. I thought of Isabella, asleep in that house, believing her father was sick because the man beside her had told her so. I thought of Paula threading this letter into a hollow engine with fevered, careful fingers, trusting that one day the husband who never doubted her enough would finally listen. I folded the letter along its old creases and slid it back into the plastic with the rest. "Abner," I said, "I need a phone. There's a man 2 towns over I have to call, and I think he's been waiting for this call longer than he knows." I made the call from Abner's kitchen, the card flat on the table in front of me, my finger steadier on the buttons than I expected. It rang twice. Then a man's voice, low and guarded, the voice of someone who had learned to give nothing away in the first 5 seconds of a call. "Martinez, my name is Hugo Spears," I said. The silence that followed told me everything. It was not the pause of a man placing a name. It was the pause of a man hearing a name he had been told belonged to someone no longer able to dial a phone. "That's not possible," Finley said finally. "I'm looking at your business card," I said. "There's writing on the back of it that isn't mine. Document the old man. I'd like to talk to you about who asked you to write it, and what you told him when you were done. I think you already know I'm not the man he described." Another silence. When he spoke again, the guardedness had cracked, and underneath it was something I had not expected. Relief, maybe, or the particular weariness of a man who has been carrying a thing he did not want to carry. "Where are you?" he said. It was not a question. "I'll come to you." He arrived within the hour, and when Abner opened the door and Finley Martinez saw me standing in the kitchen on my own 2 feet, he stopped dead on the threshold, like a man who had walked into a wall he could not see. He was younger than I'd pictured, mid-40s, with the steady hands and watchful stillness of someone who had spent time in difficult rooms. He looked me up and down, and I watched the last of his doubt go out of him. "He told me you were in a coma," Finley said. 3 days ago. Said you'd had a medical event, that you weren't expected to recover, and that he needed me to sign off on a report stating you'd shown cognitive decline beforehand." His jaw tightened. "I came here half thinking I'd find a story that didn't add up. I didn't think I'd find you upright and arguing." "Sit down, son," Abner said, and pulled out a chair. And there was no edge in it, just the plain courtesy of one working man to another. Finley sat. He told it plainly, and I will give him that. He did not dress it up or beg for understanding. 8 months ago, he said, Talon Frost had hired him through a referral, claiming to be worried about an aging father-in-law showing signs of confusion. He asked Finley to follow me, discreetly, and document any incident that suggested I could not manage my own affairs. "So I followed you," Finley said, and he looked at me steady. "For the better part of 7 months. I watched you do your shopping, watched you keep your appointments, balance your accounts at the bank, run that model railroad club down at the community center like a man running a railroad. I logged hundreds of hours, Mr. Spears." He shook his head, And I never saw one thing wrong with you, not one. Sharp as a tack every single day. I wrote it that way in every report, because that's what the truth was.
And Talon didn't like the truth, I said.
He hated it. Finley's voice flattened. Every month he got angrier. By the end, he stopped asking me to find evidence. He started asking me to make it. Wanted me to edit footage, write up incidents that never happened, put my license behind a lie. He set a thick folder on Abner's table and slid it across to me. I don't do that. I told him no, and I terminated the contract. That was 2 weeks before he called to tell me you were dying, and asked me to sign a fraud anyway. He tapped the folder. It's all in there. Every report, every hour. 8 months of documentation proving the one thing he paid me to disprove. You are exactly who you've always been.
I opened the folder. Page after page in a stranger's careful hand, each one ending the same way. Subject demonstrates full cognitive function, no decline observed, sound reasoning, intact memory. My whole self, recorded by a man paid to find me broken. And he had found me whole instead. Paula had been right down to the last detail. The floor in Talon's machine was sitting at the table across from me, and his name was Finley Martinez. There's something else, Finley said, and his face changed, went careful in a way I was learning to recognize, the look of a man about to set down a heavier weight. When he first hired me, he didn't just want you followed. He wanted me to look into your finances, said you'd been making bad decisions with money, that he was worried. So I looked. He paused. Mr. Spears, your accounts have been bleeding for months. Withdrawals, big ones, going back well before any of this came to a head. The kitchen seemed to tilt under me. How much? More than I think you're ready to hear standing in a friend's kitchen. Finley met my eyes. I documented what I could see from the outside. But the rest of it, the proof of how it was done and whose hand was on it, that's not something I can show you on paper. There's something at the bank you need to see for yourself. He let that settle. And there's one more thing I'll tell you now, because you've earned it. I don't think you're the first. The way he moved, the way he had this whole thing planned before it started. I've seen that before in a man. I think Talon Frost has done a version of this to someone else. We were at the bank when it opened the next morning. It was the same branch where Paula and I had kept our money for 30 years. The same one where we had deposited my first pension check and saved, dollar by careful dollar, for a retirement we had believed would be long. The woman who came out to meet us was the branch manager, Michaela Beale, sharp-eyed and unhurried, a person who had clearly seen money do bad things to good families and had stopped being surprised by it. Finley showed his credentials and said the words that changed the temperature of the room. Suspected elder financial abuse. Michaela's face did not move much, but something behind her eyes went hard and focused, and she took us back to a private office without another word. Once an investigator raises that flag, we're required to cooperate, she said, settling behind her desk and turning her monitor toward us. And frankly, Mr. Spears, I'm glad someone finally walked through that door. Sit down. You're going to want to be sitting. She pulled up my accounts, and I watched the bottom drop out of 30 years of work. The withdrawals marched down the screen in a neat column, and each line was a small theft dressed up as an ordinary transaction. Over the past 6 months, large amounts had left my savings again and again, drawn down until the balance was a shadow of what it should have been. Money Paula and I had set aside for nothing in particular, and everything in general. The cushion that was supposed to let 2 old people grow old without fear.
It was nearly gone. "These weren't authorized by me," I said. My voice came out flat. "I never took $1 of this out."
"I believe you," Michaela said. "And I can prove it. Which matters more?"
She clicked, and a withdrawal slip filled the screen, scanned and enlarged.
"Every one of these was done in person, with a signature. This is your signature, Mr. Spears. Or it's meant to be."
I leaned in. There it was. My name in my own hand, or near enough that any teller in a hurry would never have looked twice. The letters, the slant, the little underline beneath. And there, at the end of the underline, the small upward hook, drawn left to right.
"That's not my signature,"
I said quietly. "It's a good forgery, but whoever made it got the same thing wrong every time." I took a pen and a slip of paper from her desk and signed my name the way I had signed it for 60 years, and I showed her the difference. The single, unbroken stroke running the other way. The caboose that closed the train. "The man's name is Talon Frost, my son-in-law. He's a lawyer. He had the patience to study my hand, and the arrogance to think nobody would ever look this close." Michaela studied the two signatures side by side, and then she looked at me with something that was almost respect.
"A forensic examiner will see exactly what you're showing me," she said. "This is going to hold."
But it was the last line on the screen that did the rest of the work. Finley saw it before I did. He leaned past me and pointed. "There, that one. Scroll up." It was a withdrawal request, dated only a handful of days before the night of the tea. The amount was large, larger than any single line above it. A grab for what was left, and stamped across it in red was a single word: declined. "Insufficient funds," Michaela read. The account had already been drawn down too far. The teller couldn't complete it. She looked between the two of us. Whoever this was tried to take the rest, and the well had run dry. I sat back in the chair, and in that moment, the whole shape of it came together in my mind, the way a long train finally clears a curve, and you can see it all at once. The engine and every car behind it. For months, Talon had been bleeding me quietly, a withdrawal at a time, careful and patient. And then, just days before he poured me that cup of tea, he had reached for the last of it, and the bank had told him no. The slow theft had hit a wall. There was nothing left to siphon off in the dark. So he had moved to the only thing that would hand him everything at once, legally, permanently. Control of the man himself. The guardianship, the forged petition, the locked doors, the compound in the cup. He had not poisoned me out of hatred. He had poisoned me because the easy way had run out, and a desperate man with empty pockets does not stay patient for long. "Send me everything," Finley told Michaela. "Certified. The slips, the signature comparison, the declined transaction, the dates, all of it." "You'll have it," she said. "And Mr. Spears?" She paused, and her voice softened just slightly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. People work their whole lives for this. Nobody should have it taken by their own." My phone buzzed against the desk before I could answer her. I did not recognize the number, but the message was short, and it stopped my breath. "Grandpa, it's Caden. I got a new phone he doesn't know about. I know what he's doing. I've known for a while. Please don't trust the lawyer he hired or the doctor. I can help you, but we have to be careful. Tell me where you are." I looked at the screen a long moment. Then I looked up at Finley and at Michaela's steady, watching face. And I felt something I had not felt since the kitchen floor reached up to catch me. I was no longer the only one on this side of it. We met at the community center after dark, in the back room where my model railroad club ran its layout, because it was the one place in 2 counties where no one would think to look for either of us. I got there first and stood among the long tables of track and miniature towns that I had helped build over the years. The little signal lights blinking red and green in the dim. And I thought about how a man spends decades making a small, safe world out of steel and paint, only to find the real one has been switching tracks behind his back the whole time. Caden came in through the side door, looking over his shoulder. And when he saw me, he crossed the room fast and put his arms around me. And for a moment, my grandson held on the way he had held on as a small boy when a storm came through. Then he stepped back, embarrassed, scrubbing at his eyes with the heel of his hand.
"I thought he killed you," he said. "That night. I heard him on the phone after, and I thought, that's it, he finally did it. And then I saw you on the floor, still breathing, and I didn't know what to do. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I should have called somebody, I should have." "You dropped me a set of keys," I said. "You picked the right thing to do, son. Don't carry the rest." Kyla Swanson was with him. She ran the club's electrical and signaling, a practical young woman in her 30s who had known me for years across these tables. And she had come. Caden explained, because he needed someone who could swear to who I was. She looked at me a long moment, taking in the same man she had always known. And she nodded slowly.
"Whatever they're saying about your mind," she said, "I'll stand up anywhere and say it's a lie. You taught half this club how to read a wiring diagram last spring. There's nothing wrong with you, Hugo, and I'll tell that to a judge if it comes to it."
It was going to come to it, but that was for later. I sat Caden down at the edge of the layout and asked him what he knew, and he told me. And each thing he said landed heavier than the last.
"Mom doesn't know," he said. "I have to make you believe that first, because I know how it looks. She really thinks you're sick. He's been telling her for months that you're slipping, that you forget things, that you've been making bad decisions. He showed her papers, doctor's notes. He had her so scared and so tired, she just started believing whatever he said." Caden's voice broke. "He made her sign things, Grandpa. The guardianship papers. Some of the financial stuff. She signed because he told her it was to protect you. She doesn't know what she signed. She doesn't know about any of it." I closed my eyes. I had spent a night and 2 days hardening myself against my son-in-law, and I had braced for the possibility that my daughter stood beside him by choice. To hear that she did not, that she too had been moved like a piece across his board, was its own kind of grief. Talon had not only come for me, he had hollowed out my daughter and used her own love for me as the tool. "The doctor's notes," I said. "Where did those come from?" "That's the thing." Caden pulled out his phone, the new one Talon didn't know about, and showed me a photo he had taken of a business card left on the kitchen counter. "There's this man, comes around sometimes, real smooth, expensive suit. Ariel Hubbard. He's the one writing the evaluations. I heard Talon call him his expert. But Grandpa, I looked him up, and there's almost nothing. No hospital, no real practice I could find. Just this card and a website that looks like it was made in an afternoon." Ariel Hubbard. The smooth, unhurried voice from the phone in the dark, the one that had agreed to sign an evaluation of a man it had never honestly examined. I had a name for it now. "There's one more thing," Caden said, and he hesitated, the way Abner had hesitated, the way Finley had. And I was beginning to understand that the people drawn into Talon's orbit all eventually arrived at the same heavy doorway. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I was just trying to find anything that would help. But he keeps a box of old files in the garage, work stuff, and there was a folder in there with another family's name on it.
Different state, years ago. He swallowed. Same kind of papers. Grandpa, a guardianship, an old man. Hubbard's name was in that one, too.
The signal lights blinked red and green across the dark layout, and far down at the end of the table, a little train I had wired myself ran its endless loop, going nowhere with great determination.
He's done this before, I said. I think so. I think this is just what he does.
Caden looked at me, 19 years old and carrying a thing no boy should have to carry.
What do we do?
I looked at my grandson, and at Kyla, standing loyal beside him, and I thought of Finley's folder and Michaela's certified records and Paula's letter folded inside a hollow engine, and I felt the pieces of it coming together into something with weight and shape, something that could be pulled into a courtroom and set down in front of a judge.
We don't do anything yet, I said. We let him keep believing he's already won. And then we go find out who that other family was.
Harper Gaines kept her office in a narrow building between a hardware store and a shuttered movie theater. And on her shelves, instead of the usual rows of unread legal volumes, stood file boxes labeled with the names of old people, and beneath each name, the words versus a son, a daughter, a nephew. A whole wall of families that had turned on their own. It told me more about her than any diploma could. This was a woman who had made a career of standing between the elderly and the people who were supposed to love them.
Finley had made the introduction.
He sat beside me now as Harper, a sharp-featured woman in her early 50s with reading glasses pushed up into iron-gray hair, spread my evidence across her desk and went through it the way I go through a pre-trip inspection, slow and total, missing nothing. She read Paula's letter last, and when she finished, she set it down with both hands flat on either side of it, as though it was something that might blow away.
Your wife,
she said, would have made a hell of a lawyer. She looked up at me over the glasses.
Mr. Spears, I want to be clear with you about what this is, because most families who walk in here are fighting a sad, ordinary kind of greed. This is not that. What you've brought me is forgery, financial exploitation of an elder, and an attempt to cause you serious bodily harm to keep you from contesting a court proceeding. Some of this is state. Some of it, given the dollar amounts and the methods, is going to interest people at the federal level.
He's a lawyer, I said. He knew exactly how far over the line he was. He did, which is why he was careful. And careful men leave a particular kind of trail, because they document everything, certain they'll never be the one in the witness chair.
She tapped Finley's folder. His own investigator turned. His forged signatures are sitting in a bank's records. And now you tell me there may be another family he did this to. She steepled her fingers. Tell me about the expert.
So we told her about Ariel Hubbard, the smooth voice on the phone in the dark. The evaluations written about a man he had never honestly examined. The card with no hospital behind it. The website built in an afternoon. The name that surfaced again in a folder for a different family in a different state. Harper listened. And then she did something that told me I had found the right person for this. She did not get excited. She got quiet. The way a good engineer goes quiet when she spots the weak weld that will bring the whole structure down.
If this man is signing competency evaluations, she said slowly, then he is either licensed to do so, or he is not. And if he is not, then every document he has produced is worthless, and worse than worthless. It's evidence of fraud. Your son-in-law's entire case rests on that man's signature. She pulled a legal pad toward her and began to write. We are going to find out exactly what Ariel Hubbard is licensed to do. I have people who can run that down through the state board in a day or two. My guess, from what you're describing, is that the answer is nothing at all.
That was the moment the fear in me began. For the first time, to turn into something else. Not hope, exactly. Something colder and steadier. The feeling you get in the cab when a difficult run finally falls into rhythm and you know, in your hands and your bones, that you're going to bring the train home. "There's a hearing," Harper went on. "He filed the emergency guardianship petition. With you supposedly incapacitated, he's expecting it to go through unopposed, probably within days. He walks in, presents his forged papers and his fake expert, and walks out with control of you and everything you own." She looked at me hard over the glasses. "Unless we do nothing to warn him."
"Nothing," I repeated. "Mr. Spears, listen to me carefully, because this is the most important thing I'm going to tell you today." She set down her pen. "Right now, Talon Frost believes you are still in his house, drugged and helpless, days from a facility he chose. That belief is the most valuable thing we have. The moment he learns you're awake, that you've recovered, that you've been to the bank and have a lawyer and have turned his own investigator, he does what desperate, careful men do. He lawyers up. He destroys what he can. He coaches your daughter. He may even run." She let that sit. "But if he goes on believing he's already won, he walks into that courtroom relaxed and unprepared, expecting an empty chair where you should be. And instead he finds you sitting there, lucid, with me beside you, and every piece of this on the table." I thought of Talon smoothing my collar in the dark, arranging me like a thing he wanted found in good condition. I thought of his easy laugh on the phone. "The land is ours." "You want to let him spring his own trap," I said. "I want to let him walk all the way in believing he's already won," Harper said, "and then close the door behind him." She picked her pen back up.
Can you do that? Can you stay hidden, stay quiet, and sit across a courtroom from the man who poisoned you without giving away that you know everything?"
I thought of Paula, threading a letter into a hollow engine with fevered hands, trusting me to finally listen. I thought of Caden's hand flat against the glass. I thought of my daughter, signing away her father because the man she loved had told her it was mercy. "I drove freight for 38 years, I said. "I know how to wait for the right grade before I let the weight do the work." Harper Gaines almost smiled.
"Then let's go to court," she said.
The call came while I was sitting at Abner's kitchen table the evening before the hearing, going over my own life like a man studying for an exam he never thought he would have to take. Abner's phone rang, and he glanced at the screen and went very still, and turned it so I could see. Talon Frost. We let it ring twice while I gathered myself. Then I nodded, and Abner answered, easy as anything, the way one old neighbor answers another. "Banks." A pause. "Evening, Talon. Long time." I could hear my son-in-law's voice come thin through the speaker, smooth and warm. The voice he used when he wanted something. He was asking after me, saying I'd had a medical episode, saying he was worried, that I'd wandered off confused, that the family was beside itself trying to find me before I hurt myself. He was lying to a man who knew exactly where I was sitting. "Haven't seen Hugo," Abner said, scratching his jaw. The picture of a slow old man trying to be helpful. "Not in a while. He doing poorly? That's a shame. You try the hospital up in Flagstaff." He listened, nodded along, made the right small sounds. "Well, you let me know if there's anything I can do. I'll keep an eye out." He hung up and set the phone down between us, and we both looked at it. "He doesn't know," Abner said. "He doesn't know." It should have felt like triumph. Mostly, it felt like sorrow. My son-in-law was out there in the dark somewhere, working the phones, certain that the worst that had happened was an inconvenient old man who had crawled off to die in the wrong place. He still believed tomorrow morning would be a formality. He was going to walk into that courtroom relaxed, expecting an empty chair. Harper had told me that was exactly what we wanted. And it was. But knowing a thing is right does not always make it sit easy in a man's chest. I did not sleep much that night. I sat up in Abner's spare room with the lamp on and went over Harper's questions one more time. State your name, your date of birth. Describe your finances. Do you understand why you're here? She had drilled me that afternoon until I could answer flat and clear. No hesitation, no confusion. The way a competent man answers. Because the whole game tomorrow turned on a judge looking at me and seeing exactly the man Finley's reports described. I was not worried about the questions. I knew who I was. What kept me up was Isabella. I took out my wallet and found the photograph I had carried for years. My daughter, at 7 years old, gap-toothed and laughing, sitting on my shoulders at a railroad museum with a conductor's cap sliding down over her eyes. I had lifted her up to see over the crowd at a steam engine pulling into a platform, and she had shrieked with joy at the size and the noise of it. And I had thought, holding her small ankles in my hands, that I would spend my whole life keeping her that happy and that safe. Tomorrow I was going to walk into a courtroom and take apart the life she had built, the man she had married, the father of her son. I was going to set down evidence that would put her husband in handcuffs and very likely in prison. And I was going to do it knowing she still believed, at that very moment, that I was the one whose mind had failed. Cadence swore she didn't know. I believed him. But belief does not soften the blow that's coming for a person. And there was no version of tomorrow where my daughter walked out of that room with her life intact. Whatever I did, I was going to break something in her. The only choice I had was whether I broke it with the truth or let Talon finish breaking it with a lie. There is a thing we did on the railroad that you only ever do when everything else has failed. When a train is running away and there is no other way to stop the disaster, you pull the emergency brake. You reach up and you haul it down with everything you have, and the whole train screams and shudders and tears at itself, and people get thrown from their seats, and there is damage, real damage, every time. You do not pull it because it is gentle. You pull it because the alternative is worse. You pull it because the people on board will not survive what is coming if you don't. I sat there in the lamplight with my daughter's 7-year-old face in my hands, and I understood that tomorrow I was going to pull the emergency brake on my own family. It was going to hurt everyone aboard. It was going to throw my daughter from her seat, and there was no honest way around it. Because the train Talon Frost had built was running straight for a wall. And Isabella and Caden were on it, and so was I. And a man does not stand by and let the people he loves ride to their deaths because stopping the train will bruise them. Paula had pulled it the only way she could, from a sickbed, with a letter in a hollow engine. Now it was my hand on the brake. I put the photograph away, turned off the lamp, and lay in the dark, listening to the far-off freight horns rolling down out of the high country. The loneliest and most familiar sound I know. Somewhere out there, my son-in-law was sleeping the easy sleep of a man who thought he had already won. Let him sleep, I thought. Tomorrow. I pulled the brake. The courtroom was smaller than the ones you see on television. Plain and bright, with the flat institutional light of a place where ordinary lives are taken apart in an afternoon. I walked in beside Harper Gaines at 9:05, and I watched my son-in-law's face come apart. Talon was already at the petitioner's table in a suit that cost more than my first car, papers squared in front of him. The relaxed posture of a man waiting for a formality. His lawyer leaned in to say something. Talon was nodding, half smiling. Then the door let us in, and he turned at the sound, and he saw me. I've spent my life watching gauges drop. I knew the look of a needle falling off a cliff. That was Talon's face. The color went out of it in 2 heartbeats, confidence to confusion to something close to terror. and his hand closed on the edge of the table hard enough that I saw the knuckles whiten. He had expected an empty chair. He had gotten the man he poisoned, walking in upright and clear-eyed with a lawyer at his side. I did not glare at him. Harper had told me not to. I simply looked at him, the way you look at a thing you have finally understood. And then I went to the respondent's table and sat down and folded my hands, and waited. Behind me, in the gallery, I felt rather than saw the two people who mattered. Caden, near the back, leaning forward, and Isabella somewhere to the left. And I did not let myself look for her, because Harper had warned me that if I looked at my daughter, I might lose the steadiness I needed. And she was right.
All rise!
The judge came in, and my first thought was that we had drawn well. Royal Holmes was a tall man in his 60s with a close gray beard and the unhurried movements of someone who had heard every lie a courtroom could produce and had stopped being impressed by any of them. He sat, settled his glasses, and opened the file. "This is the matter of an emergency guardianship petition," he said, "filed on behalf of Hugo Spears by Talon Frost." He looked up, and his gaze moved from Talon to me and stayed there a moment. "I'm told the respondent intends to contest. Before we go any further, Mr. Spears, I'd like to hear from you directly. Competency is the heart of this petition, and I prefer to use my own eyes." He leaned back. "State your full name and date of birth for the record." "Hugo Spears," I said. My voice came out level and carried to the back of the room. "Born March 4th, 1959. Do you know why you're here today, Mr. Spears?" "Yes, Your Honor. My son-in-law has petitioned the court to be made my guardian on the grounds that I can't manage my own affairs. I'm here to tell you that's false, and to show you why." Judge Holmes asked me the rest, the same questions Harper had drilled into me at Abner's kitchen table. The date, where I lived, how I supported myself. He asked me to describe my finances, and I did, account by account, the pension, the savings, the amounts, and then I told him, plainly, that more than half of those savings had been drawn out over the past 6 months by a hand that was not mine, with a signature that was not mine, and that I could prove both. I watched the judge's eyes sharpen. I watched Talon's lawyer start to rise, and I watched Judge Holmes wave him back down without even looking at him. "You'll have your turn, counsel," the judge said. "Right now, I'm assessing competency, and I'll tell you, this is the most competent respondent I've had in this chair in some time." He turned back to me. "Mr. Spears, your attorney has filed a substantial response. I've read it, but I want it in the room. Ms. Gaines, you may proceed." Harper stood. She did not raise her voice. She never did, the whole morning. She simply began to lay it down, piece by piece, the way you build a case, the way you build anything that has to bear weight. She put up the forged power of attorney first, and then a slip of paper on which I had signed my own name in open court, and she showed the judge the difference. The underline that ran the wrong way, the small reversed hook at the end. My little caboose running backward in every forgery and forward in my own hand. I saw Judge Holmes lean in. I saw him see it. She put up the bank records next. The column of withdrawals marching down, the certified slips, and the last one stamped in red. Declined. Insufficient funds. Then she put up Finley's folder. 8 months of surveillance, commissioned by the petitioner himself, every report concluding the same thing. Subject demonstrates full cognitive function, no decline observed. The petitioner had paid a man to prove me broken, and the man had documented month after month that I was whole. Talon's lawyer was on his feet again, objecting, talking about family disputes and concerned children and reasonable disagreements. Judge Holmes let him talk and then said mildly that he had eyes and could read, and that the counsel should sit down and save his arguments for evidence that helped him.
The room had gone very quiet. I could feel the shape of the thing turning now, the great weight of it finally tipping over the crest. And I knew Harper felt it too, because she let the silence hold a moment before she spoke again.
Your Honor, she said, the petitioner's entire case rests on a single document, a competency evaluation, declaring my client unfit, signed by a man the petitioner has described as his medical expert. She turned, and for the first time that morning she let an edge into her voice. I'd like to talk about that expert. The petitioner has him here today, prepared to testify. I think the court should hear from him. She looked at Talon's table and then at the judge. The defense calls Mr. Ariel Hubbard to the stand.
Ariel Hubbard walked to the stand like a man who had done it before, smooth and unhurried. The expensive suit, the practiced ease. I recognized the walk before I recognized anything else, because I had heard that ease in his voice through a phone speaker while I lay paralyzed on a kitchen floor. He took the oath without a flicker. He folded his hands. He waited to be admired.
Harper did not admire him.
Mr. Hubbard,
She began, pleasant as a spring morning.
you signed a competency evaluation of my client, declaring him unfit to manage his own affairs. Is that correct?
That's correct, and you're qualified to make that determination.
I am.
By what license? The smallest pause. A man used to being believed is not used to being asked for the paper behind the belief. I have extensive experience in geriatric assessment, he said.
That isn't a license.
Mr. Hubbard, let me be specific. Harper lifted a single sheet from her table.
I have here a response from the State Licensing Board, certified and dated yesterday. It states that no one by the name Ariel Hubbard holds or has ever held a license to practice medicine or psychology in this state, or to perform competency evaluations of any kind. She let the page hang in the air. Would you like to correct your earlier answer?
The room did not breathe.
Hubbard's smooth face worked once, twice, the look of a machine searching for a gear that is no longer there. He glanced toward the petitioner's table, toward Talon, the way a man looks for a door, and found none.
The circumstances of these evaluations. You are not licensed to perform competency evaluations, Harper said. Yet you signed one declaring a man incompetent, knowing it would be used to strip him of his rights and his property.
That is not an opinion, Mr. Hubbard. That is fraud. She turned to the bench. Your Honor, the single document on which this entire petition rests was manufactured by a man with no authority to produce it.
Judge Holmes was writing now, fast, his mouth a hard line, but Harper was not finished. And I understood then why she had held her timing all morning, why she had let the room go quiet and tight before each blow. She had built it like a grade, slow and steady, saving the steepest part for last.
There's more, Your Honor, and it speaks to whether this was a desperate mistake or a practiced method.
She lifted a folder. This is a guardianship file from another state, from 4 years ago. Another elderly man. Another set of forged-looking financial transfers. And the same expert signature at the bottom. Ariel Hubbard. She set it down. The petitioner has done this before. He has a partner in it. And the gentleman on the stand is that partner.
Talon's lawyer shot up, objecting, his voice climbing toward panic, and Judge Holmes overruled him without raising his own.
Then Harper looks back at me, just for an instant, and I gave her the smallest nod, because this last piece was ours.
mine and Caden's and Finley's, and we had agreed she should be the one to set it down.
One final item, Your Honor. The petitioner believed there was no record of his intentions. He was careful. He deleted what he could.
She held up a small drive. But careful men forget that a phone backs itself up. With the help of the petitioner's own stepson and verified by a licensed investigator, we recovered a voice recording. It was made the night of October the 7th in the petitioner's home, while my client lay drugged on the floor.
She looked at the judge.
With the court's permission.
Holmes nodded. And Talon Frost's own voice came out into that silent courtroom, thin and clear and unmistakable. The smooth confidence of a man who believed no one who mattered could hear him. He won't last the week at the facility we picked anyway. Old men go downhill fast once they're institutionalized. Nobody questions it. Then the land is ours.
I had heard those words once before, in the dark, unable to move a finger. Hearing them now, in the light, with my son-in-law's face draining grey in front of a judge, I felt no triumph. I felt the floor of that kitchen again under my cheek. I felt the cold. And I felt, underneath it, the long, slow grief of a thing finally, fully proven. The recording ended. The silence after it was the loudest thing in the room. And then, from the gallery behind me, a chair scraped, and a voice I had been not looking at all morning broke the quiet.
Your Honor,
It cracked in the middle.
please, I need to say something.
I turned then. I could not help it. Isabella was on her feet. My daughter. The 7-year-old from the photograph grown into a woman with her mother's eyes, and those eyes were streaming, her hand pressed to her mouth, looking not at me and not at the judge, but at her husband, at Talon, at the man whose voice still seemed to hang in the air over all of us.
I didn't know,
She said, to him, to the room, to me.
I swear to God I didn't know.
She turned to the bench, swaying, gripping the rail of the gallery.
I signed those papers. He told me my father was sick. He told me it was to protect him. Your Honor, please, let me testify. I have to tell you what he told me. I have to.
Judge Holmes looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Then he looked at Talon, whose mouth had opened and produced nothing at all.
Swear her in, the judge said.
They swore her in, and my daughter took the stand with her mother's eyes and her mother's straight back. And she did not look at her husband once. She looked at me. For the first time in 3 weeks, since before the kitchen floor, since before any of it, Isabella looked her father full in the face. And what I saw there undid me more than any evidence had. It was not just grief. It was the dawning horror of a person realizing, in front of a room full of strangers, that the ground she had been standing on was never there at all.
Mrs. Frost, Harper said gently, tell the court what your husband told you about your father.
Isabella drew a breath that shook the whole way in.
He said Dad was slipping, she began. Months ago, after Mom got sick, he started saying it. Little things at first. That Dad forgot a conversation. That Dad seemed confused at the funeral.
Her voice steadied as she went, the way a teacher's voice steadies even through tears. Because she had stood in front of rooms her whole life, too, same as her mother.
I didn't see it myself, but Talon's a lawyer. He's careful. He had answers for everything. When I said Dad seemed fine to me, he told me that's how it goes, that family is the last to notice, that I was in denial because I'd just lost Mom and couldn't bear to lose him, too.
She pressed her lips together. He showed me papers, evaluations, a doctor's name on them.
Her eyes flicked just once toward the wreckage of Ariel Hubbard, who sat now slumped and small. I believed them because why would there be papers if it wasn't real? Why would there be a doctor? He brought me documents to sign, and he sat with me at the kitchen table, and he held my hand and he said, "Isabella, this is how we keep him safe. This is how we make sure no one takes advantage of him." And I signed. God help me, I signed every one. Her voice broke. I thought I was protecting my father. I was handing him over.
"Did you know?" Hopper asked.
About the money?
No. Flat. Immediate. Certain. I found out an hour ago, in this room, like everyone else. I never saw a bank statement. He handled all of that. He said it was complicated, that he was managing it for Dad's benefit. She turned to the judge, and now the tears came freely and she let them.
Your Honor, I am a grown woman, and I let a man tell me my own father was disappearing in front of me, and I believed him over my own eyes, because I trusted him, because I loved him, and because I was so tired and so sad after my mother that I just wanted someone else to carry it.
She wiped her face with the back of her hand, an ordinary human gesture in that cold, formal room.
I will never forgive myself for that. But I am not going to sit in this gallery and let him finish it. Whatever I signed, I take it back. All of it. My father is the most clear-headed man I have ever known. And the only thing wrong with his mind is that he raised me to believe people are better than they are.
I had told myself, all through that long, sleepless night, that I was prepared to lose her. That pulling the brake meant throwing my daughter from her seat, and there was no gentle way to do it. I had braced for a daughter who hated me, or worse, who could not look at me. Instead, she sat on that stand and dismantled the lie with her own hands, choosing me in front of the world. And I sat at my table and wept, openly, an old man crying in a courtroom and not caring who saw.
Across the aisle, Talon Frost had stopped being a person and become a collapse. I'd watched him my whole acquaintance wear control like a tailored coat. Now it came off him in pieces. He had whispered something furious to his lawyer when Isabella first stood. He had gone rigid when his own voice filled the room. But it was his wife's testimony that finished him. As she spoke, the last of the smooth thing in his face slid away, and underneath it was nothing I recognized, nothing fatherly or husbandly or human, just a man watching every exit close at once, calculating to the very end and finding no number left that worked. When Isabella said, "I take it back, all of it," he half rose from his chair, and his lawyer pulled him down, and the sound he made was not words. Judge Holmes let the silence settle. He looked at Isabella a long moment, and his voice, when it came, was kinder than it had been all morning. "Thank you, Mrs. Frost. You may step down." He waited while she crossed back, and as she passed the gallery rail, she reached out and her hand found Caden's, and the two of them, my daughter and my grandson, held on to each other the way people hold on when the train has stopped at last, and they are checking to see who is still alive. The judge squared the papers in front of him. He took off his glasses, folded them, and set them down with the deliberateness of a man who has reached the end of his deliberating. "I've heard enough," Royal Holmes said, "to make my ruling." Judge Holmes did not draw it out. Good men in hard jobs rarely do. "The petition for guardianship is denied in its entirety," he said. "I find the respondent, Hugo Spears, to be fully competent and in command of his own affairs. I further find that this petition was brought in bad faith, supported by a forged power of attorney, a fraudulent competency evaluation signed by a man with no license to produce it, and evidence of substantial financial exploitation of an elder." His voice hardened with each line. the way a coupling tightens under load. This is no longer a civil matter for this court alone. I am referring the entirety of this record to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation, including, but not limited to, forgery, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and the apparent administration of a harmful substance with intent to incapacitate. He looked over the bench at Talon Frost. Bailiff, I'd ask that the petitioner not leave this building until the prosecutor's office has been contacted.
The bailiff, a broad, steady man named Arlo Bean, who had been standing by the wall all morning, moved toward the petitioner's table. Talon's lawyer was already gathering papers and distance. The particular speed of a man putting room between himself and a client who has just become radioactive. What happened next happened fast.
Talon came up out of his chair, and for one ugly second I thought he might run. Or worse, that he might turn toward the gallery where his wife stood. But Arlo Bean's hand settled on his shoulder, firm and final, and a second officer stepped in from the side door, and the handcuffs came out, and the small metallic sound of them closing was, in that quiet room, the loudest thing of the whole morning. I watched my son-in-law's wrists locked behind him. I waited for it to feel like victory. It did not. They walked him toward the side door, and at the threshold he stopped and twisted around, and his eyes went past the judge, past his lawyer, past even Isabella, and landed on me. Whatever he had been all those years, the polished smile, the easy laugh, the careful hand smoothing my collar in the dark, all of it was gone now. And what looked out at me was only a frightened man who had run out of moves.
"Hugo," he said.
I did not answer from across the room, but I stood. And I asked the judge if I might have a single minute, and Royal Holmes, who had seen a great many endings, looked at me a long moment, and then nodded. 1 minute, Mr. Spears. I walked out into the marble hallway where they held him. Up close, with the courtroom doors swinging shut behind me, my son-in-law looked smaller than he ever had.
"Hugo, listen. I was drowning," he said, fast, the words tumbling. "The debts, you don't understand. The people I owed. I had no choice. It got away from me."
"Stop," I said. Not loud. He stopped. I looked at him for what I knew would be the last time. The father of my grandson. The man my daughter had loved. The man who had measured my remaining life in days and poured it into a cup of warm tea. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you I hate you," I said. "I've carried enough heavy things in my life to know hatred is the heaviest, and I'm too old to haul it. So I forgive you, Talon. I do. Not for your sake, for mine, and for Isabella's, and for that boy who's going to have to grow up knowing what his stepfather did." I held his eyes. But forgiveness isn't a second chance. It isn't a door left open. You are finished in this family. You will not be near my daughter or my grandson again. Whatever the law decides to do with you, that part is already decided. And I'm the one who decided it. I stepped back. "Goodbye, son. I hope you find some way to live with yourself, because nobody else is going to carry it for you anymore." He said my name once more as they led him away. I did not turn around. My boots carried me back down that marble hallway in the same steady rhythm Paula used to say came from 40 years of bringing heavy things safely to a stop. And I did not look back at him. Not once. Isabella was waiting outside the courtroom doors, and Caden beside her. My daughter looked at me with her mother's eyes, brimming and wrecked and ashamed, not knowing if she had the right to come to me after everything she had signed. I opened my arms. She came into them the way she had at 7 years old at a railroad platform, and Caden folded in against the both of us. And the three of us stood there in the hard, bright light of that hallway and held on. and none of us said anything, because there was nothing yet that words could carry. I had won. The petition denied, the lie exposed, the man who poisoned me in handcuffs and bound for a cell. By every measure, that morning was a victory, and I stood in the middle of it holding the two people I had left. And what I felt, underneath the relief, was the strangest hollowness I have ever known, because Paula was not there to see it. Because the family I had spent my life building had a hole torn through the middle of it now that no verdict could mend. Because winning, I was learning, does not give you back what was taken. It only stops more from being taken. The train had stopped. We were all still alive, and the wreckage was everywhere around us. The desert was already warming the morning they sentenced him. I did not go. Harper called me afterward from the courthouse steps. 11 years, she said. Federal time for fraud, forgery, and the exploitation of a vulnerable adult. There would be no early train out for Talon Frost. I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where my legs had once stopped working under me, and I waited to feel something. Triumph, maybe. Relief. What came instead was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles over a yard after the last train of the night has gone through, when the rails are still humming, but the noise has moved on without you. I had won. But winning, I learned, is not the same as healing. For weeks, I drifted. I dusted the little black engine and set it back in its case, though I could never look at it the same way again. Paula had hidden the truth inside a toy, and the toy had saved me. Some nights, I sat with it in my lap like a man holding a sleeping grandchild, and I talked to her. I told her she had been right. I told her I was sorry I had not seen it sooner. The house answered with its old creaks, and that was enough. Caden pulled me out of it. He showed up one Saturday with 2 cups of coffee and a notebook full of drawings, a floor plan. The old depot on Mill Street had been sitting empty for 15 years, and the county was looking to lease it cheap to anyone who would care for it. "Grandpa," he said, "what if we filled it with your trains?" He had Paula's eyes when he said it, and a stubbornness that came straight down my own line. We did it. It took most of a year. Abner came down on weekends with his bad knees and his good hands. Kyla wired the lights. Finley, who had no reason left to help me, and helped anyway, hauled lumber until his back gave out. We laid a loop of track through the main hall and set my engines running on it. The whole collection, 40 years of them, whistling soft through a building that had been silent for a generation. Children pressed their faces to the glass. Old men I had not seen since the rail yard came and stood beside me and did not say much, because men like us never did. But I knew what their standing there meant. We hung a brass plate by the door. The Paula Marshall line. Beneath it, smaller. A safe place for those the world tried to put away, because the museum was only half of it. The other half started the day. A thin woman named Rosie Ray walked in out of the heat and asked, in a voice worn down to almost nothing, whether this was the place that helped people. She was 71. Her nephew had her pension card and her front door key, and a stack of papers she did not remember signing. She had heard, somehow, in the way these things travel between the forgotten, that the man with the trains knew a lawyer. I sat her down. I poured her coffee, and I made sure she watched me pour it. Then I called Harper. That is how the fund began, not as a plan, but as a door I could not close once I had seen what was on the other side of it. There are more Rosies out there than anyone wants to count. Old people quietly stripped by the very hands meant to hold them. We could not save all of them,
But we could keep the lights on, keep the lawyer's number by the phone, keep a chair open for whoever walked in next.
Isabella came home, slowly, the way you ease a heavy train into a station so nothing jolts. There was a great deal between us that could not be undone, and we did not pretend otherwise. But she stood beside me at the depot the day we opened, and she held my arm, and she called me Dad, and I did not need the rest of it fixed all at once. We had time now. That was the thing Talon had tried to steal and failed. Time.
I am 67 years old. I drove freight across this country for 38 years. And if that work taught me anything, it is this. A train is heavier than any one man. Once it is rolling downhill, it does not care about your plans, your love, your good name. It will run you down and never feel the bump. The only thing that stops it is somebody willing to reach up, take hold of that cold steel handle, and pull, even knowing the whole car will shudder and scream around them.
They counted on me being too old, too tired, too alone to reach the brake. They were wrong. If you are out there listening to this, and you are frightened, and the people who should protect you are the ones you have come to fear, hear me. You are not as alone as they want you to believe. There is always someone down the line. Find them. And if you ever find yourself standing beside someone who is being run down in the dark, do not look away. Every train needs someone brave enough to pull the emergency brake. I am still here. And the last locomotive is still running.